It was a cold, gray morning in a small town called Maplewood. People hurried through the streets, their faces buried in scarves, their hearts wrapped in worry. Among them was Ethan Miller, a young man in his late 20s, struggling just to make it through the day. Once full of dreams, Ethan had lost nearly everything: his job, his apartment, and his belief that life could ever get better. He sat on a park bench, clutching a half-empty cup of coffee, thinking of the life he once had. His parents had passed away years ago, and his closest friends had moved on. That morning, Ethan wasn't sure he had the strength to keep trying. He looked down at his worn shoes, thinking, maybe no one would even notice if I disappeared. That's when it happened. A woman named Grace Thompson, a retired schoolteacher in her 70s, stopped in front of him. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes carried years of wisdom and kindness. She held out a paper bag and said, "You look like you could use a warm breakfast." Ethan hesitated. I'm fine," he muttered. But Grace didn't move. "I made too much. You'd be doing me a favor if you took it." Something about her voice, calm, genuine, broke through his defenses. He took the bag. Inside was a homemade sandwich, an apple, and a small handwritten note that said, "The darkest nights often lead to the brightest mornings. Don't give up." Ethan read that note over and over. He didn't know it then, but that tiny moment of kindness would change not just his life, but millions of others in the years to come. The next day, Ethan showed up at the same park bench. Grace was there again, feeding birds. They started talking about life, about loss, about hope. Over the next few weeks, they became unlikely friends. Grace shared stories about her late husband and her years teaching children who came from broken homes. Ethan shared his failures, his fears, and how the world just felt heavy. Grace listened, really listened, and one day, she said something that stayed with him forever. "You don't need to change the whole world, Ethan. Just make one person's day better. That's how real change begins." Inspired by her words, Ethan decided to try. He took a few dollars he had left and bought an extra coffee for a homeless man he passed every morning. The man smiled, and for the first time in a long time, so did Ethan. That simple gesture turned into a habit. A few weeks later, he started volunteering at a community kitchen. Then, he began recording short videos about acts of kindness, people helping each other, strangers stepping in when no one else did. At first, only a few dozen people watched. But then one of his videos, where a young boy shared his lunch with a hungry stray dog, went viral. Millions saw it. People commented how it made them cry, how it reminded them that goodness still existed. Ethan named the project Kindness Chain. His mission was simple: encourage one person to do one kind act and share it, so the chain would never end. Within a year, the movement spread across cities, then across countries. People donated to shelters, helped their neighbors, planted trees, and rebuilt communities, all inspired by the same idea Grace had taught him: start with one act. Years later, Ethan was invited to speak at a global conference about humanitarian change. As he stood on stage, looking at thousands of faces, he held the old paper note Grace had once given him. His voice trembled as he said, "This all began with one person, a woman who gave me breakfast when I had nothing. She taught me that kindness doesn't need money or fame. It just needs a heart willing to care." He looked up, and there she was, Grace, sitting in the front row, tears in her eyes. The audience rose to their feet, applauding, not just for Ethan, but for her, the woman who started it all. Ethan walked down the stage, knelt beside her, and whispered, "You changed my life." Grace smiled softly. "No, dear. You changed the world." That night, the conference lights dimmed, but the message burned brighter than ever before. Across the world, thousands of new kindness chain chapters began, in schools, workplaces, and homes. A single breakfast, a single note, a single act of kindness. That was all it took to remind humanity that even the smallest spark of compassion can light up the darkest corners of the world.